Dave Chappelle is speaking out against the backlash to some of his jokes on his podcast, The Midnight Miracle. He's calling out trans activists who claim that his jokes are violence, but then go out and literally get violent. Now, for a lot of these people, it's not a one-to-one correlation. A lot of people complaining on the internet, saying things like your words are violence, are not then going out and smashing windows. But the inverse is not the same. The people who are going out and smashing windows are typically the people who are saying your words are violence. And we have the story here from the Post-Millennial. 4 of 6 Antifa Atlanta riot suspects denied bond. Riot suspects? Aren't these guys being charged with domestic terrorism? Okay, hold on there. Post-Millennial. I've been saying Libby. I gotta call Libby. No, I'm not here to continually rag on the Post-Millennial's editorial decision making. But they do keep saying riot suspects. I think it's fair to say terror suspects. They are quite literally charged with terror. But let's go into this, and I'll show you an example. We have Billboard Chris. He's the guy who wears a sandwich board that says children can't consent to puberty blockers. And he was mercilessly attacked by these extremist trans rights activists. Now, of course, I'm not saying all trans people. Media Matters, calm down. And before you write your article up, I'm saying specifically that people who are violent are in the wrong. Now, while I can certainly understand why someone would take issue with jokes they find distasteful, I get it. There are a lot of jokes from 100 years ago we don't say anymore. Totally understand. And you're offended now. Fine. There's no excuse to go out and attack people, especially when it's hypocritical, especially when they say jokes are violence, but then they physically attack you. Like they did Billboard Chris. Look, this is a guy, he's swinging a street cone. Now, don't come to me and say, oh, it's just a street cone. I don't care. They left him bleeding. They mercilessly beat Andy No. Okay? Here's a story from the Daily Mail. Dave Chappelle slams hypocrite trans protesters who claim his jokes cause them violence and then turn up to his shows and attack people. Dave Chappelle confronted recent backlash on his podcast as he slammed trans protesters who claimed his transphobic jokes caused violence against them, but then turned up to his show and became violent. It's funny how that works, isn't it? The comedian's show in Minneapolis last summer was forced to change venues because of the backlash from the community. And while Chappelle was met with a line of fans and a standing ovation at the Varsity Theater, he was also met with violent protesters. In the latest episode of his podcast, the Midnight Miracle podcast with co-host Talib Kweli and Yasin Bey, Chappelle and the protesters threw eggs at him, yelled for him to go home, and even threw a barricade at the crowd. Holy crap. Man, Talib Kweli, man. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. I'm not so super familiar with his politics, but I think I could be wrong. So Talib, forgive me if I'm getting your politics wrong. I think he was very anti-establishment. Today, I think he more aligns with left wokist kind of policies, but I could be wrong. I'm not here to drag anybody. This is about the people who are violent. They were in the wrong. He pointed out the hypocrisy of protesters who have blamed transphobes and those speaking out against trans for recent violence against the trans community, yet are now causing violence themselves. Chappelle drew a backlash in 2021 for material in his Netflix comedy special, The Closer, that some in the LGBTQ plus community said ridiculed transgender people. His supporters viewed it as a cry against cancel culture. Dave Chappelle, the greatest of all time, they say. I want to give a shout out. Deep respect. I know we probably disagree on certain things. Of course, that's totally cool. Tremendous respect for Dave Chappelle for doing one thing that I think needs to be mentioned. He did a bit in his, I think it was Sticks and Stones, where he mocked Asian people, mercilessly doing the stereotypical Chinese man joke from back in the day that we've long gotten rid of because it is offensive and racist. And I have tremendous respect for Dave Chappelle doing that joke as an Asian man, part Asian myself. Shout out to the College Humor gag about, if you're Asian enough to actually use certain words or whatever. But as someone who has very deeply Asian family, seeing that joke made me laugh. I enjoyed it. Okay, I guess the issue is we're not Chinese, we're Korean and Japanese. Mostly culturally Korean, but we found out through DNA tests we're actually part Japanese. I wonder how that happened, if you know history. Anyway, Dave Chappelle made a joke about Asian people. I know I'm not like a little old Asian man working and facing that kind of discrimination, but what I respect is He's willing to go after everybody. His comedy special was not just targeting one group of people, but it was one group of people that got violent. You didn't see a bunch of Asian people come out and start attacking Dave Chappelle and threatening him with violence because he mocked Asian people. In fact, I actually enjoyed it. It was shocking, and I was laughing, being like, I can't believe he would do that. Wow. I know Dave Chappelle doesn't hate Asian people. I know he doesn't hate me for being part Asian. I don't think Dave Chappelle hates people for the most part based on race. I say for the most part because I don't know the guy. But my assumption of him is, hey man, we're here to make jokes, to mock stereotypes and people, but just know it's not violence against you. It's because we're all in the same space. We're all equal. I make fun of you, you make fun of me. People make fun of me on the internet all day, every day. And the only thing you can do is, hey, look, man, you want to be in the limelight, you want to be famous, people are going to make fun of you. The one thing they shouldn't be doing is getting violent at you because you made jokes. Now, what's up with that? Question. Where are the hordes of angry Asian protesters or Koreans on rooftops threatening Dave Chappelle for mocking Asians? You see the issue here. It is specifically trans activists, okay? And I'm not saying trans people. I'm saying these specific people who are violent are trans activists, not pro-Asia activists. There's something about that ideology. Transphobia is not a joke. Look, ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm assuming your gender. Individual person, if you would like to stand outside of a Dave Chappelle a venue holding a sign saying transphobia is not a joke with a rainbow bag, you have my respect. Thank you for letting people know how you feel. I think it's very important. I think it is very, very important that if people are taking issue with certain elements in our culture, someone come out and say, hey, you know what, man, like, I'm not a fan of this. And I'll say, okay, I will keep you and your feelings in mind because I am trying to be a good person. Thank you for expressing this to me. I may continue to watch Dave Chappelle and appreciate his jokes. But you know what? When you're nice to me and you say things like, imagine this. Imagine you go to a Dave Chappelle show and outside is a trans person saying, hey, everybody, I know you all really like Dave Chappelle. I'm also a big fan. I was kind of, I think the jokes he's done about trans people are outdated. I would hopefully in the future see him move past these jokes. There are jokes going back to the early 1900s that we don't do anymore, jokes about stereotypes based on race. I hope that one day we view jokes about gender identity in the same way. I'd be like, I feel kind of bad because I get that. You know, I don't want you to feel bad. I want you to be happy. I want you to live a good life. I would respect that positioning. I would respect it if someone says, please laugh today, enjoy the show, and then consider we feel hurt by this. And that's not to say that you're a bad person for enjoying it. It's just to think about it in the future and to consider if you're interested in our feelings, and you don't have to be, just so you know. I'd be like, I really respect that. I really appreciate it. Thank you for telling me this. I will consider that. I do understand. I totally understand. We used to do a bunch of comedy we don't do anymore. That's not what they're doing. And I beg them to please do that. It's effective. No, what they're doing is they're showing up and they're mercilessly beating a guy wearing a sandwich board. Now, to be fair to this lady with the transphobia is not a joke, I don't see her doing anything in this photo. I'm not going to rag on her. I respect protest. This country, you have a right to protest. We need the discourse. And if someone did come up and passionately and politely say, please enjoy Dave Chappelle, he's the greatest comedian of all time, just take into consider this one thing is all I ask, then I would expect someone else to be like, with all due respect, I really do appreciate you saying that. My view is that the jokes being made here, and I'll say this literally, my response to that polite request is, I don't want you to feel bad. I'm sorry you do. But I personally view these jokes as humanizing and normalizing, making us consider that you exist and that these things are how people feel or they're meant to be over the top, but it brings you into the conversation. I think mockery and humor is important. I think people should be mocked a little bit. Nobody is above that. But I want to be nice to people. The problem I have is they were attacking people. They were throwing barricades. They were throwing eggs. This is wrong. Dave Chappelle's got it right. Chappelle's show at Minneapolis First Avenue Club in July was canceled, with the venue apologizing to the community for booking him and vowing to keep the club a safe space. Nah, homie, don't play that. We're opening a coffee shop, venue, club, place, game shop, skate shop, big building. And I'm going to put Molan Labe in the window. Come and take it. Second Amendment rights. I'm going to put a Gadsden flag. You do not come and dictate what we do. And you know, it's funny. I said that. And then I have people saying, yeah, well, that you expect a brick through your window. And I'm like, and? Am I supposed to cower in fear because violent psychopaths want to physically attack me? It ain't gonna happen. Here's what we'll do. We'll have armed security guards. We're in West Virginia, baby. Don't come throwing bricks at us. Don't endanger our lives. Another idea I had was, what if I replace the windows with bricks? I mean, that sounds pretty funny. What if they walk up to the windows, ready to throw a brick, and they're like, it's a brick wall. Ain't nothing to throw a brick through. That could work too. We'll make a brick door. That'd actually be funny. The door is very heavy. And like you try to open it, you're pulling it. It's made of bricks. I think that would be pretty funny. And then maybe what are they going to do? Graffiti the building or whatever? I don't know. Fine, whatever. We'll get security. We'll get bulletproof glass. I accept these terms. I think they're wrong. I think it should be stopped by the police. I think these people are evil. But I tell you this. I know that when we launch this venue, when we create this space, far left psychopaths will try to threaten violence against us. I know that's the reality. I'm not going to hide and cower. If you want to support us and our bulletproof windows, become a member at timcast.com, clicking that join us button. I do it. I want to do what I can. You know, I want to make things better. I want to call out the lunatics. I'm going to host a comedy show. We hosted a comedy show with Ryan Long. Very offensive humor. Everybody was laughing and whoa at some of the jokes. And you know, Ryan Long doesn't actually hate you when he makes these jokes. It's just meant to be a show, to shock, to make you laugh, to make you a little angry perhaps. It's to elicit a reaction. You're alive. These people are lunatics. Quote, I guess apparently they had made a pledge to the public at large that they would make their club a safe space for all people and that they would ban anything they deemed transphobic, Chappelle said. This is a wild stance for an artistic venue to take, especially one that's historically a punk rock venue. Yet when his show was rescheduled for the Varsity Theater, large groups of protesters swarmed to the outside of the venue and became violent. Quote, these were grown people of various genders and gender identities. They threw eggs at the fans who were lined up to see the show. He's on the podcast. One lady was so mad with the protesters, she picked up a police barricade, Chappelle added. You ever seen one? They look like a bike rack. This bee picked the barricade up by herself and threw it at the crowd. I got to tell you, it's an amazing feat of strength for a woman. One lady was so mad with the she threw the barricade at the protesters. But Chappelle said the protesters did not succeed in getting his show canceled. Instead, when he walked on stage, he was greeted with a standing ovation. Dave, you're the greatest of all time. He's the GOAT. That's what they say. I like George Carlin a lot. I do. But Dave Chappelle's a living legend and everybody knows it. I think Dave's a good dude. I don't think he's an overtly political dude. And that's fine. You know, so that means we're probably going to disagree on a lot of things. I think he takes a view of racial justice protests in a way I disagree with. But I'm not here to tell people they have to live the way I live. I'm not here to tell people they have to think the way I think. I'm here to tell you why I think the way I do. I'm here to show you facts or details or things that I think will help you in your understanding. And if at the end, Dave Chappelle comes to me and says, nah, man, you're wrong. You totally don't get this. I'll say like, bro, I respect it. I do. I think you're wrong too. You know, that's great. I've talked about it too with with Marvel movies. Chris Evans. I think Chris Evans is absolutely fantastic in his acting roles. I thought Knives Out was fantastic. That was the Rian Johnson movie. A little bit of wokeness in there, but it worked really well where like, it seemed like Rian Johnson actually understood arguments from MAGA and from wokeness. And I thought it was interesting that they were both painted as like, you know, not really good people or whatever. Chris Evans played the Ransom character and he was the smarmy rich kid. I liked it. Thought it was good. I think he's good as Captain America. And I just saw him in another movie. I can't remember what I saw him in. But I think he's great. I think his politics are garbage. I think he's really annoying on Twitter. But you know what, man? I'm trying here. Mark Ruffalo is extremely insufferable. But you know what, man? When I watched him in Thor Ragnarok, I thought he was fantastic. I'm commenting specifically on his ability. If a dude is woke as they come, but the man can, you know, shoot a three-pointer from hit a half-court shot over his head, I'd be like, he was very good at doing that. If like He never misses a free throw. I'd be like, guy's clearly good at free throws. His politics are trash, but man, if I want to watch a basketball game, I'll watch this guy. That's the thing about Dave Chappelle or anybody else. Dave Chappelle is extremely funny. We were watching a Chappelle show skit. I mean, it was incredible stuff. One of the funniest guys ever, and everybody knows it. And if he had politics I didn't agree with, I'd be like, look, man, you're the funniest guy. Yeah, it's unfortunate we disagree politically, but respect to the talent, skill, and ability of this man. He says, when I walked on stage, it was a huge ovation because suddenly going to see a comedy show was this huge act of defiance. I don't think anyone had any malicious intent. In fact, one of the things that these people, the trans and their surrogates, always say is that my jokes are somehow going to be the root cause of some impending violence that they feel is inevitable for my jokes. But I got to tell you, as abrasive as they were, the way they were protesting, throwing eggs at people, throwing barricades, cussing and screaming, none of my fans beat them up. In fact, the people in the crowd would say, we love you. Like, what are you talking about? That's right. Look at that. F Chappelle. It's because it's a cult. It's a cult, man. That's what it is. A still image of a man swinging a street cone at Billboard Chris because he said he was going to Berkeley today. It's a cult. Violent, insane, and evil people. Dave, I hope you one day truly understand. Maybe he does now, maybe not. My point is this. I'll tell you a story. This is for Dave Chappelle. He will never hear this because, I don't expect him to watch my show, but I hope he hears this story. Daryl Davis, I'm such a huge fan of. An old blues musician from Chicago, an old black man, who one day said to himself, how could someone hate me if they never met me? And he decided to go to a Klan rally or a meeting of sorts. And it's kind of a surprising thing to think that an old black man's going to go intentionally walk into a crowd of literal white supremacists in robes and all that jazz. And he walked up, he talked to him. Over a period of time, many of these men abandoned the Klan and took off their robes. I love the story of when he talks about how this one guy was a big rock and roll fan and was a big fan of this rock and roll music. I can't remember the exact details, but there was a hot rod or something. And then Daryl Davis was like, I know those guys. I can get you in that car. You can sit down. And the guy was like, no way. And he's talking to a Klan guy, a Klan member who was like a high-ranking dude. And he's like, that famous car you dreamed about, you got pictures of? Come hang out with me. I will sit you down in that car. And the dude's nearly brought to tears, and he's hugging this black man who he's long believed were bad. And now all of a sudden he has a revelation. That racism stuff ain't true. People are different. I love the thing Daryl Davis talks about. He said he was riding in a car with a Klan member, and the Klan member told him that black people were genetically predispositioned for violence. And then Daryl goes, well, white people are predispositioned, have a gene that makes them serial killers. And the guy goes, that's not true. And he goes, name a black serial killer. And it's like, about that. It's not a legitimate argument. It's a thought argument. Like, can you? Of course, there's no gene that makes someone a serial killer. Or, I mean, honestly, I don't know. Maybe there is. But it's not inherent to race. People can be violent from all different backgrounds. There's different demographics. We get it. The reason I tell you this story. So when Daryl Davis was speaking at an event that I set up with the guys from Minds and Myth Informed, far left extremists showed up. They threatened to burn down the theater, got the show canceled. We had to move venues just like you, Dave, and go to a smaller venue where we ended up losing some of the seats, unfortunately, cost us money. And when we went to our after party, the far left extremists were there threatening violence. So Daryl Davis said, I'm going to go talk to these people. It's what he does. And when he went outside to try and talk to him, they screamed at him, threatened him, called him a white supremacist and a Nazi, wouldn't let him speak at all, leaving him confused and dumbfounded. A man who was able to go and speak to Klan members at Klan rallies could not walk up to a handful of far leftists and ask them what were they thinking and feeling and why were they mad. They did not care. He made a post about it on Facebook. And he was like, I've never experienced this. I couldn't even talk. It was nuts. Here's this guy who walked into a Klan rally and said, hey, let's talk. And Klan members said, okay. But Antifa said no. This, Dave, is what you're dealing with. A violent, psychotic cult. I'd call it a religion if they believed in some kind of afterlife or deity. They have their ideological views, but it's a cult. And I say it's a cult because you can't speak truth to them. They're not interested in facts. They are violent, and they are violent to the ends of their ideology. They have proselytizers and priests, people who command and spread the ideas that you must follow. And that's it. Don't be an apostate. So to Dave, the greatest of all time. So they say. I don't know if Dave's the greatest comedian of all time, but I can't say I can mention anybody better. Richard Pryor, maybe. Eddie Murphy. But George Carlin, too. George Carlin was absolutely hilarious. And the reason why I mentioned Pryor and Murphy is that George Carlin drops all these racial slurs in his show and then calls Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy the N-word, but explains it's because he doesn't actually think that it's meant to be shocking in the show to make a point about racial slurs. And everybody clapped and cheered, all these liberals, all these hippies. You know, what changed? What changed? Now, personally, I would never do the bit that George Carlin did. You know what I mean? I do think things can become outdated. But he was making a point not to insult people based on race, but to insult the slurs themselves and the ideas behind being offended because someone said a word that did nothing to you. There are challenges. I certainly agree that words have power. And they have more power than anything else, the conveyance of ideas. And if you convey certain ideas, they can lead to violence. Like critical race theory, I believe, can lead to violence. But none of the classically liberal people are advocating for any of that stuff. So they're lying because they're the violent ones. They are weaponizing fear against you. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.